Do you know the real rules of the library? Not the obvious ones. Not the be quiet, handle books with care, or return them on time kind of rules. I'm talking about the real rules, the ones that, if you don't follow them, could cost you your life. You don't know them? Then you're lucky. But now that you're hearing this story, you're about to. And once you know them, you can never forget them. Because these rules aren't just superstitions. They are warnings, etched in blood and tears, accumulated over centuries. My name is Patrick Matheson. I'm 38, single, and the librarian in Pine Hollow, a small town of 1,432 people. It's a place so small you'd be hard-pressed to find it on a map. A forgotten speck off the interstate. Tourists rarely come. Young people move to the city as soon as they graduate high school, leaving behind only the elderly and eccentrics like me. 2 months ago, I found an old book in the library called The Naughty List. My name was in it. The only one not crossed out. That night, I heard scratching at my window. A horned shadow stared back at me. But this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. The real terror started when I found out why my name was there, and what happened to the hundreds of others. It all started 2 months ago. Back then, my life was the picture of mundane routine. I'd open the library at 9 a.m., organize books, help the occasional patron, and close at 6 p.m. I'd go home, make dinner, read a book, and be asleep before 10 p.m. My house is a small bungalow, 3 blocks from the library. The kitchen faucet drips, and the floorboards creak. It was an unremarkable house, steeped in the smell of coffee and old wood. My mother left me this house when she passed, and it was filled with her memories. Sometimes, I still feel like she's sitting in the old rocking chair in the corner of the living room, with her knitting needles resting on her lap. The basil plant on the kitchen windowsill, which she last watered, somehow remains vibrant and green. My only companion was a fat tabby cat named Rupert. He was a grumpy old fella, with a vexing habit of knocking everything off the table edges, but his presence brought me comfort. My mother used to say,
Animals see things that humans can't.
I often think of her words when I watch Rupert, especially when he stares intently at empty spaces or suddenly hisses, his fur bristling. The people of Pine Hollow were kind, but I didn't have any close friends. Maybe it was my personality. I'm not very sociable, and I prefer quiet. The library was my sanctuary. The smell of books, the hushed space, nothing bad ever happened there. Time moved slowly, and it felt insulated from the world's noise. This library was a historic building, constructed in 1887. It was a typical Carnegie Library design, with a red brick and stone facade. Inside, it featured high ceilings and large windows, and when the afternoon sun streamed in, the dust motes floating in the air shimmered golden. Yet, perhaps because of the building's age, it sometimes made strange noises. Footsteps would echo at night when no one should be there, or book pages would rustle even without a breeze. But for a place that was supposed to be a normal workplace, it was also strange. Sometimes I'd catch a fleeting glimpse of something moving swiftly among the back shelves. On several occasions, a book would plummet from the highest shelf, hitting the floor with a heart-stopping crash. Maybe there was an explanation. It was an old building. Vibrations could cause books to fall. But sometimes, just sometimes, I wondered, why did the fallen books always land in the same spot, right in front of the door to the back room? And why, each time I picked them up, were the pages already open, as if someone had just been reading them? My predecessor had vanished suddenly a week before her retirement. The police filed a missing persons report, but the investigation was called off after a few weeks. Her car was left in the library parking lot, and her handbag was still in her desk drawer. It was as if she had simply evaporated into thin air. It was a quiet afternoon when Mr. Grayson approached my desk. He was a thin man in his 60s, with thick glasses and a voice like rusty hinges. One of the oldest residents in town, if you wanted to know about Pine Hollow's history. No one knew more than him, but he rarely spoke. He came to the library once a week, always sitting in the same chair, an old oak one by the window, reading microfilmed old newspapers. No one knew what he was looking for. Since he wasn't usually one for small talk, I was surprised when he placed a folded piece of paper on my desk and cleared his throat. His hand trembled, and his face looked paler than usual.
"The rules,"
He said, tapping the paper with a bony finger.
"If you intend to keep working here, you'd best follow them to the letter."
Rules? I asked, perplexed. You mean the library regulations? Because if so,
"No,
he interrupted.
not those superficial things. The real rules. My predecessor entrusted them to me before she disappeared."
I frowned and unfolded the paper. It was in my predecessor's handwriting, her distinctive, shaky script. The first 4 rules, while odd, seemed mostly harmless. 1. Always feed the goldfish before closing. 2. When the lights go out, close your eyes until they come back on. They always will. 3. Never touch the 3rd book on the 2nd shelf in the back room. 4. Do not lend any book without a barcode to anyone. Goldfish? I asked. Did the library have a goldfish?
"It does.
Mr. Grayson's voice lowered.
In a small tank in the back room. The food is in the drawer at the reception counter."
But when I read the 5th rule, for some reason, my stomach twisted. 5. Always tell the truth. It might save your life. I looked up, half expecting him to laugh and say it was a joke, but Mr. Grayson just stared at me. His expression was unreadable. I saw something in the depths of his eyes, a mix of fear and sorrow. Why do we need such rules? I asked. He was silent for a long time. Then he finally spoke.
"This library is old. It's been here since 1887. Many librarians have worked here during that time. All of them knew these rules. Those who followed them lived long. Those who didn't."
He trailed off. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me with a slip of paper and a creeping unease. Why would a library have such rules? And the 5th rule, why mention saving your life? For the rest of that day, I searched the reception counter drawer. Sure enough, there was a small container of goldfish food. The label read, "Every day at 6 p.m. I found it on a cold December afternoon. Snow had been falling all morning, and no one had come to the library. The only visitor was old Mrs. Hargrove, who returned 3 dog-eared romance novels, lectured me that young people nowadays don't understand good literature, and left. After she was gone, the library was as quiet as a tomb. Around noon, I decided to spend some time in the back room, ostensibly to organize shelves, but really, it was to stave off boredom, and to look for the goldfish Mr. Grayson had mentioned. The back room was where books that didn't fit on the main shelves were stored, outdated encyclopedias, forgotten manuscripts, donated books no one wanted. It was also my favorite part of the building. Rows of sagging shelves filled with tomes that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. The air was heavy with the smell of dampness and paper, a place where time seemed to stand still. In the corner of the room, I found a small fish tank. Inside, sure enough, a single goldfish swam slowly. It looked a little different from a normal goldfish. Its scales shone strangely, and sometimes it would move as if staring at me. Do fish stare at people? When the library was empty, I'd sneak back here and rummage around, sometimes finding hidden gems, first editions, handwritten poetry collections, old diaries, each with its own unique history. Sometimes I found strange books too, dark ones that sent chills down my spine, manuscripts on demon worship, guides to sorcery, and overly detailed illustrations from medical texts on human death. I couldn't understand why such books would be in a small-town library, but the book I found that day was unlike any other. It caught my eye on a shelf I'd never paid attention to before, wedged between two crumbling atlases. It was exactly in the position Mr. Grayson had described, the third book on the second shelf. Remembering Rule 3, I initially hesitated to touch it, but curiosity was stronger than fear. The cover drew me in. It was dark brown, almost black, and looked like leather, but not the kind of leather you'd see on a fancy journal or a new wallet. This leather was uneven, coarse, and seemed to have been stretched and attached to the cover by hand. Looking closely, I could see tiny pore-like marks on the surface. It was almost like skin. There was no title, just a small clasp holding the book shut. The clasp was made of tarnished metal, and touching it left a taste of rust on my fingertips. When I touched it, my skin prickled. The leather felt warm, as if alive. I even felt a faint pulsation. My first instinct was to put it back on the shelf and pretend I hadn't seen it. I was breaking Rule 3 after all, but curiosity won out. I unlatched the clasp and opened the book. The moment I did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop sharply. The goldfish swam frantically, and the water in its tank rippled with small waves. The first thing I noticed was the handwriting. It wasn't printed like a normal book. Every letter was handwritten in a neat, slanted script. The ink had faded to a rusty brown, and the pages felt brittle to the touch. Yet, strangely, the ink also seemed wet, as if it had just been written. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, it read, "The Naughty List." I almost laughed. At first, I thought it was some kind of twisted, Christmas-themed joke journal. But as I turned the pages, the smile faded. The book was filled with names. Hundreds, thousands of them, all written in the same elegant script. Each name was crossed out with a sharp, heavy line of ink. The names seemed to be in chronological order, with the oldest ones dating back to the early 1800s. As I continued turning the pages, some names jumped out at me. Surnames I recognized from Pine Hollow. They might have been ancestors of families still living in town. A shiver ran down my spine when I realized that. And then, there was my predecessor's name, with the exact date of her disappearance noted. Every name was crossed out, except for one. At the bottom of the last page, beneath the crossed-out names, was my name, Patrick Matheson. I stared at the name for hours. My hands trembled as I flipped back and forth through the pages, looking for anything I might have missed, an explanation, a note, anything. But there was nothing. Just page after page of crossed-out names. "It's okay, Patrick," I whispered, my voice shaky. "It's just someone's prank." But whose? I was the only one who went into the back room, and this was the first time I'd seen this book. And how did they know my name? My full name? And why did it know the exact date of my predecessor's disappearance? One more thing I noticed. The last page of the book still had many blank lines, as if waiting for more names to be added. Rupert let out a low growl at the entrance, and I almost dropped the book in surprise. He stared at me with wide, dilated eyes. His fur bristled, and he backed away when I tried to shoo him off. His gaze was fixed on the book. "Fine, you coward," I muttered, snapping the book shut. "I'll figure this out myself." But deep down, I knew Rupert was right. I shouldn't have touched this book. But it was too late. I had already seen it. And once seen, it cannot be forgotten. For the rest of the day, I tried to shake off the unease. I locked the book away in my desk drawer and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to it. When closing time came, I remembered Mr. Grayson's rules and fed the goldfish. The small creature looked at me as it ate, as if trying to tell me something. By the time I closed the library, I was exhausted. Still, I couldn't resist taking the book home. I needed answers. That night, at my kitchen table, sipping tea, I opened the book again. Rupert had left the room and was watching me from down the hall, as if trying to keep a safe distance from the book. This time, I noticed something I hadn't before. The crossed-out names. They looked different. At first glance, they seemed like random scribbles, but under the bright kitchen light, I saw faint impressions beneath the ink. They were words. Hidden messages. I grabbed a pencil and gently rubbed it over one of the names. The hidden message appeared like a ghost rising from the page. Found by the fire, 1842. A chill ran down my spine. I tried another name. Carried away from the shadows, 1927. As I examined more names, each had its own cryptic and terrifying phrase. Dragged into the snow, screaming, 1899. Last seen under the tree, 1975. Alone in the library, screaming for help, 1999. Each phrase was more horrifying than the last. These weren't just records of death. They were records of a hunt. A record of something that had been hunting people for centuries. And the hunting grounds were always around Pine Hollow. The most terrifying was my predecessors. Last seen in library back room. Broke the rules. October 15, 2024. 11:47 p.m. It was the exact date and time of her disappearance. And it said she broke the rules. Which rules? Why? And then there was my name. I rubbed the pencil over the blank space beneath mine, praying nothing would appear. But the words did appear. Faint, but unmistakable. Before midnight, I felt the blood drain from my face. Midnight? Tonight? I looked at the clock. 11:15 p.m. Only 45 minutes left. Before I could process what that meant, I heard a sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it grew louder, sharper, the sound of claws scraping against glass. It was coming from the living room window. Rupert began to growl low in the hallway. His fur was fully bristled, and his tail was thick. He was staring in the direction of the window. I stood up, clutching the book to my chest. With trembling hands, I switched off the living room lights and cautiously peeked through a gap in the curtains. At first, I saw nothing. The streetlight reflected off the snow, making the yard glow white. But then, I looked closer, and there were footprints in the snow. Not human. They were too large, and the claw marks were clearly visible. The footprints crossed the yard, circled the house, and then stopped directly beneath the window. And then, a shadow moved. Something stood outside the window. It was human-shaped, but not human. Horns sprouted from its head, and its eyes glowed red. It stared at me, its mouth seemingly opening to speak, but no sound came out. I only saw its breath cloud the window pane. I backed away, almost dropping the book. When it hit the floor, the thud echoed through the house. The presence outside the window vanished, but the scratching continued. Now it was coming from the back of the house. It was moving. It was looking for me. The clock read 11:30 p.m. 30 minutes until midnight. Even after the scratching at the window stopped, my nerves were completely frayed. Just minutes until midnight. The words "before midnight" drummed in my head like a frantic drumbeat. The old library chair creaked. and only the hum of the heater broke the silence. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and branches intermittently tapped against the window panes. But the scratching I'd heard earlier was different. It was more deliberate, more human, or perhaps more terrifying because it wasn't human. Staring at the book, I re-examined the other names. Among the thousands of crossed-out names, only one was circled in red ink: Gerald H. Bonner. Unlike my name, this one was in the middle of the book, surrounded by older names from the 1940s. Why wasn't it crossed out? Looking closely at the surrounding names, most were people who had appeared in newspaper obituaries in recent decades. Accidental deaths, illnesses, some too young. But they had one thing in common. They had all committed some sin during their lives. I opened my laptop and searched for the name. There were few results, but I found a mugshot. A 76-year-old man, arrested 6 months ago for assault, out on bail, residing in Ravenhill. Reading further, his history of violence became clear: domestic violence, neighbor disputes, suspected animal abuse. The police incident seemed only the tip of the iceberg. He was alive. The only other person, besides me, whose name wasn't crossed out. I glanced at the clock. 11:20 p.m. No time left. But something compelled me. I couldn't sleep like this. I needed answers. The drive to Ravenhill was tense. Snow slapped against the windshield, and the road was slick with ice. I kept checking the clock on the dashboard. Almost midnight. The car radio crackled with a distorted weather forecast.
Heavy snow warning tonight and tomorrow. Advised to stay indoors.
I turned down the volume. There was no turning back now. As I left town, streetlights became fewer, and the road grew darker. Beyond the reach of my headlights, it was complete darkness. Occasionally, I'd see two glowing points deep in the forest, animal eyes, perhaps, but everything felt ominous tonight. The car radio suddenly hissed and died. In the silence, only the hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on snow remained. And then, I felt a glance from the back seat. I checked the rearview mirror, but there was only my bag. Yet the sensation didn't disappear, as if something was watching me. I arrived at a dilapidated apartment complex, Ravenwood Apartments. 3-story brick buildings, rusty balconies, flickering neon signs. The kind of place you wouldn't want to approach at night. A few old cars, half buried in snow, were parked in the lot. One had a spiderweb crack across its windshield. Another's door was left half open. According to the article, Gerald lived in apartment 2B. As I approached the building, blue light from a TV spilled from a first-floor window, and a baby cried somewhere. Half the light bulbs in the second-floor hallway were out, casting irregular dancing shadows. The hallway reeked of mold and a sour smell. Paint peeled from the walls, and the carpet squelched underfoot. Fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, occasionally going completely dark. Each time, I had the fleeting sensation that something was watching from down the hall. I stood before apartment 2B. The door was a grimy white, covered in countless scratches, as if something had clawed it from the inside. I pushed the ridiculous thought from my head and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, as if he had been waiting for my arrival. The stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke hit me. A tall, but hunched man stood there. Greasy gray hair, a crumpled, leathery face, bloodshot eyes, and yellowed teeth. But the most unsettling thing was the cunning in his eyes. They were the eyes of a man who had seen all the filth in the world.
What do you want?
He growled. His voice was raspy from decades of cigarettes and alcohol. Mr. Bonner? My name is Patrick Matheson. I have something important to discuss.
Important?
He looked me up and down.
Trying to sell me something? Religion? Or are you a tax man?
No, it might sound strange, but I found a book with your name in it. A list. The naughty list. That stopped him. His watery eyes stared at me for a moment, and something registered. Recognition. Fear. And, interestingly, a sort of resignation. But then, he scowled.
You're either drunk, crazy, or both. But come in, if you want to waste my time.
As he stepped aside, the squalor of the apartment became apparent. But I had to go in. I needed answers. The apartment was worse than I imagined. Empty beer cans littered every surface, and the air was heavy with the smell of unwashed clothes and burnt food. Stains spread across the walls, and a patch on the ceiling was stained brown from a leak. Dirty dishes piled high in the kitchen sink, and the refrigerator emitted a suspicious hum. Gerald sank into a worn recliner, gesturing for me to sit on a sofa that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 70s. Before sitting, I saw a cockroach scuttle out from under a cushion. I decided to remain standing. I opened the book and showed him his name. This list. Everything is crossed out, but your name and mine are the only ones left. He leaned forward, staring at the page. He was silent for a long time, but his lips twitched, as if he was trying to remember something, or perhaps struggling with something he didn't want to recall.
Listen, kid.
He finally said,
I don't know what that thing is, but you don't want to get involved. Trust me.
You know it. You know what it is. He hesitated, then nodded.
Yeah, I've seen it before. Back when I was your age, I guess. My grandmother told me about it. She grew up in the mountains of Europe. See, she used to tell me stories about Krampus.
Krampus?
An old demon. Santa's shadow, you might say. Prisons for the good kids and for the bad kids. Well, you saw it.
He pointed to the book.
That's the list. His hunting ledger.
What is it? What happens to the people on the list? His laugh was bitter, devoid of humor.
What happens? They die. Everyone gets their due, one way or another. You think it's a coincidence I'm the only name left? I've been running from this thing for decades. It's like a curse.
I looked around the room. This is living on the run?
Don't laugh, kid. You don't know the hell I've been through. Moving from place to place, changing my name, trying to erase my past, but it always finds me. Every year, as Christmas gets closer,
He shivered.
I hear the footsteps. On the roof, in the chimney, and the scratching. Always the scratching.
How have you survived? Why hasn't it come for you yet? He gave me a sharp look.
You think I haven't tried to figure it out? I've done everything. Burned the book, buried it, tried to give it to someone else to pass on the curse. But it's no use. Nothing works. Once you're on the list, you're done for.
There's no way to stop it?
No. At best, you buy yourself some time or pawn it off on someone else. Someone you don't care about.
He smiled a cruel smile.
Good luck, kid. Now get out. Before he comes.
Suddenly, the apartment fell silent. The wind outside stopped, and I couldn't hear the neighbor's TV anymore. Gerald's face turned ashen.
Too late.
He whispered. Leaving Gerald's apartment, I felt sick to my stomach. The man was vile, bitter, and mean beyond words. But his terror was real. It was a visceral, soul-deep fear that couldn't be faked. I wasn't sure if I believed his whole story, but one thing was clear. If he was on the list, he deserved to be. The snow was falling even harder, blanketing the parking lot in white. The wind picked up, lashing snow against my face. Halfway to my car, I heard a sound. A faint scratching coming from Gerald's apartment. I froze and looked back. The sound grew louder, sharper, echoing in the cold air. It was coming from above, from the chimney. Now it was loud, echoing, scraping, crumbling, and then, God, a deep, inhuman growl. I froze by my car, snowflakes clinging to my hair, my breath clouding in the cold air. My brain screamed at me to leave, but my feet were rooted. I couldn't tear my eyes from Gerald's apartment. A deep thud echoed through the night, rattling the windows closest to the chimney. Whatever was descending was not small. The entire building vibrated, and other apartment residents peered from their windows. But they didn't seem to see anything, as if it were a show only for me. The sounds abruptly stopped, leaving an eerie silence that somehow felt worse. And then I saw it. The chimney flue exploded outwards, spewing soot and shattered brick. I heard the metallic clatter of debris hitting the hoods of snow-buried cars, and a colossal figure emerged, crouching in Gerald's dimly lit living room. It was not human. It couldn't be. Massive, at least 7 feet tall, with long, gangly limbs covered in coarse black fur. Curved horns jutted from its skull, scraping the low ceiling as it unfolded itself with unnatural grace. I saw jagged teeth, and its eyes, glowing red, scanned the room like a predator. Its gaze burned like embers, conveying an ancient malice and immeasurable age. On its back, it carried a filthy sack, and something inside seemed to squirm, as if still alive. From the sack, I occasionally heard muffled moans. I pressed myself against the car's hood, my heart pounding. From my crouched position, I had a clear view through the apartment window, and I prayed the monster wouldn't look out. Inside, Gerald was frozen in his recliner. His face was ash pale, and a cigarette fell from his lips. He said nothing, couldn't say anything. He just stared, finally seeing what he had feared for decades. The creature, Krampus, moved faster than its size suggested. It lunged across the room, clearing furniture and shaking wall pictures from their hooks, gripping Gerald by the front of his shirt before he could even stand. Gerald screamed, struggling uselessly against the creature's grasp. Its claws enveloped him like steel traps, lifting him from the ground as if he weighed nothing. Gerald's feet thrashed in the air, his shoes kicking at the floor. Gerald's scream turned into a choked sob as the creature brought him closer, its face inches from his. It opened its mouth, and a sound came out that chilled me to the bone. Not a roar, not a growl, but something worse. A guttural, unearthly chuckle that vibrated the walls and echoed deep in my bones. I was paralyzed, only able to watch. The creature reached into its sack and pulled out a small, ornate wooden box. The box was strangely beautiful, with intricate carvings that seemed to shift in the light. The engravings looked like ancient script, and my eyes hurt trying to make sense of them. It placed the box on the floor, opened the lid, and then it began its work. Gerald thrashed and screamed, clawing at the creature's arm as it began to fold him. There was no other way to describe it. The creature bent Gerald's body in unnatural directions, compressing him like a doll. I heard the cracking of bones, the squelch of flesh being compacted, and his screams turned into a desperate, tangled shriek. It didn't stop. It didn't even hesitate. It was mechanical, efficient, like a ritual performed hundreds of times. It pushed Gerald into the box, piece by piece, folding and stuffing him until the man's entire body disappeared inside. The last thing I saw was his face, somehow still alive, contorted in terror, until the creature slammed the lid shut. It was over in seconds. Silence fell over the room. The creature stood there for a moment, its hulking back to the window, holding the box in its enormous hand. The box now looked heavy, and I heard a faint squirming sound from within. Then it turned, slowly, deliberately. Its eyes met mine. I don't know how it found me in the darkness and snow, but it did. The red glow of its eyes cut through the night, staring at me across the car hood. For a terrifying moment, I felt like I was the only one it could see, as if only the two of us existed in the whole world. And then it smiled. A wide grin spread across its hideous face, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. It wasn't a smile of kindness or warmth, but the kind of smile a predator shows when it has cornered its prey. A smile savoring the end of a long-awaited hunt. One claw extended, pointing directly at me. The claw was unnaturally long, its tip sharply pointed, and I knew it was my turn. My heart stopped. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." But Krampus's pointing finger remained. And from the sack, I heard a voice. It was Gerald's. Still alive, still suffering. As the creature's chuckle echoed in my mind, I scrambled into my car, fumbling for the keys. My hands trembled so violently it took 3 attempts to get them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the car into reverse, nearly skidding into a snowdrift as I sped out of the parking lot. My headlights cut through the falling snow, but in the rearview mirror, I could still see the window of Gerald's apartment. The creature stood there, watching me leave. Its glowing eyes burned like coals. Then, hoisting the sack onto its shoulder, it disappeared from the window. But I knew this wasn't the end. Rather, it was just the beginning. Shaking in my car, I was forced to confront something I had sealed away in the depths of my memory. Krampus's pointing finger wouldn't leave my mind. Those red eyes had seen straight into my soul. When I got home, the book was back on my kitchen table, even though I'd taken it with me to Gerald's apartment. I opened the pages, and Gerald's name was crossed out with a red line. Still wet, blood red. And then I remembered. A winter night in my early 20s. A time when I was broke and bitter at the world. A 2-story house on Willow Street, with warm light spilling from its windows. The happy scene of a middle-class family infuriated my poverty-stricken heart. An unlocked door. It's amazing how many people forget to lock them. Clocks, trinkets, valuables, and then the blaring alarm. The details of that night came back vividly. Fleeing through the back door, leaving footprints in the snow, tripping under a streetlight and scraping my knee, reaching home breathless, hiding the stolen goods under my bed. The mix of relief and guilt when I heard on the news the next morning that an arrest had been made. The person arrested in my place was an 18-year-old engineering student named Jason Daniels. He was just walking by with headphones on, in the wrong place at the wrong time. His fingerprints were on the front door, likely from a delivery a few days prior, but it was enough for the police. I said nothing, did nothing. I just hid in the shadows and watched him be handcuffed. I even heard his mother's frantic cries repeating, "My son is innocent." Now, the price for that was etched in my name on the naughty list. 15 minutes until midnight. When I pulled up to the sheriff's office, the clock read 11:45 p.m. The building was typical of a small rural town's public architecture. Brick, with fading gold letters on the well-worn wooden door that read County Sheriff's Office. Clutching the leather-bound book to my chest, I walked up the building steps. The light bulb above the door attracted insects, their tiny wing beats breaking the night's quiet. Inside, I was greeted by the scent of old wood and coffee. Sheriff Carter was at the reception desk, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. A middle-aged man with a thick mustache and a weary expression. He had served as a law enforcement officer in this town for many years and had a face that had seen all kinds of people.
Patrick? He looked up from his newspaper. What are you doing here so late? It's a blizzard out there. He looked up from his newspaper. What are you doing here so late? It's a blizzard out there.
I took a deep breath, then said, I have something to tell you about something I did.
What about it?
Carter folded his newspaper, his expression turning serious. The Willow Street home invasion. A few years ago, the person arrested was innocent. I was the one who did it. Silence filled the room. Only the old clock on the wall ticked away the seconds. Sheriff Carter leaned back in his chair, looking at me with an unreadable expression. In his eyes, there was less surprise than a kind of sorrow.
That's quite a felony confession you're bringing in, Patrick.
He said quietly, Why now? Why now? I know. But I have to do the right thing. The sheriff stared at me for a long time, then picked up the phone.
I'll contact the Daniels family. They have a right to know.
It didn't take long to bring in Jason Daniels. He was older now, his face changed by the passage of time and bitterness, but I recognized him immediately. The once hopeful 18-year-old was now a man in his early 30s, but in his eyes, there remained a look of lost trust and deep hurt. He walked into the office, his shoulders hunched with caution. He didn't know why he'd been called until he saw my face. When he recognized me, his expression hardened. I broke into that house. On Willow Street. You were innocent. Silence filled the room. Then Jason laughed. But it wasn't a laugh of joy, but one of disbelief.
Are you serious? You show up after all these years to confess? What do you expect me to thank you? You ruined my life.
I know. I'm sorry.
Sorry?
He took a step closer, his voice rising.
Do you know what I went through? What my family went through? The trials, the lawyer fees, the whispers every time I walk down the street? Do you know what it feels like to be called that thief's son?
His voice trembled. Years of anger and pain poured out.
I got kicked out of school. My future in engineering vanished. I couldn't get a job for years because of you. Every employer saw my criminal record during background checks. It didn't matter that I was innocent. The record stays.
I said quietly. I should have come forward then, but I was scared. I was selfish. Jason stared at me, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, but instead, he turned away and shook his head.
What good does it do now? Do you think sorry fixes everything?
I don't think it fixes everything, and I don't expect you to forgive me. Sheriff Carter intervened.
Jason, please sit down. Patrick, you too. This will require formal procedures.
Jason sat in the chair but didn't take his eyes off me.
Why now? Why is your conscience bothering you now?
I looked at the book. It was still on the table. I can't explain why, but I can't live with the lie anymore.
It was the day before my wedding.
Jason's voice softened.
My fiancée believed me, but her family. We eventually broke up. She loved me, but she couldn't handle the pressure from everyone. You didn't just steal my job and my school. You stole my life.
After Jason left, Sheriff Carter took me to a small interrogation room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. He asked me to tell him everything. The break-in, the stolen items, the wrongful arrest, and why I had kept silent all these years. I told him everything I could remember.
What did you steal?
2 watches, a small jewelry box, and I think it was $120 in cash. I used it for my mother's medicine.
Medicine?
My mother had diabetes. We didn't have insurance, and we couldn't afford insulin. But that's no excuse. Carter nodded.
I understand the circumstances, but that doesn't excuse ruining Jason's life.
I know. As the sheriff left the room to make a call, I noticed it. Beyond the frosted glass window, 2 red orbs floated. At first, I thought they were distant car lights reflecting off the snow, but they didn't move. They stayed there, staring through the glass with a burning, terrifying intensity. Krampus! He was watching me, and the red lights moved, blinked, and then disappeared. But I heard it, a faint scratching, echoing from the building's roof. In that moment I understood. He had heard my confession, and something had shifted. The air felt lighter, as if a burden that had weighed on my shoulders for years had lightened, just a little. Outside the office, in the shadows, Krampus took out the naughty list. I will never forget how his colossal claws moved swiftly, carefully, over the pages. Under the moonlight, his figure seemed less a mythical creature and more an ancient embodiment of justice. Terrifying, merciless, but not unjust. He crossed out my name, but not completely, with a thin line, as if to signify, on hold. It wasn't mercy. It was a warning, a second chance. In his eyes, staring at me through the window, there was no longer the cold ruthlessness of a hunter. Instead, there was ancient wisdom and an understanding of human frailty, as if he was saying, "Don't make the same mistake again." And then he vanished into the snow, with his sack on his back, searching for the next name. My trial is set for next week. My lawyer, Tom Grayson, was blunt.
Honestly, Patrick, the jury is going to hate you. You let an innocent young man take the fall while you went on with your life. But the fact that you turned yourself in will be considered, and the restitution to the victim's family will make a good impression.
He was right. I had already prepared all my savings for restitution to Jason and his family. It wasn't enough, but I did what I could. Jason Daniels had already testified about the impact my crime had on his life. But in the end, he said something unexpected.
I won't forgive him. I can't get back what he took. But the courage to tell the truth, that means something. It's too late, but it still means something.
I lost my library job. The town's library board fired me for lack of moral character. Neighbors avoid me, and even the barista at the local coffee shop struggles to meet my eyes. Only Rupert remains unchanged, still knocking things off the counter. My old friend, Mr. Grayson, visited me at home.
Everyone makes mistakes, son.
He said, patting my shoulder with his wrinkled hand.
What matters is what you do after.
But there's a strange calmness. For the first time in my life, I'm not running from what I did. The self-loathing I felt every time I looked in the mirror is slowly fading. The book is still with me, no matter if I burn it, bury it, or throw it in the river. It always returns. But now, it feels less like a curse and more like a responsibility. And then, a letter arrived. No return address, no stamp. An envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a poem, written in blood-red ink. The eternal list, the naughty list, etched in fate, its ink as shadow, cold as hate. One strict decree, so clear and dread. Keep far away, lest you be bled. But when truth's light breaks through the dark, a path to grace, a hopeful spark, for souls repentant, mercy found, a second dawn, on hallowed ground. Below it, it read, P.S. Be a good boy, Patrick. Or else. There was no signature, but none was needed. I knew who it was from, and this time, it sounded more like encouragement than a threat. Recently, new names have begun appearing in the book. Modern names, names of people who are still alive. The list is never complete. As long as humans exist, as long as there are those who make mistakes, hurt others, and run from their actions, the list will continue to grow. Sometimes, I see names I know. The bully from high school, a neighbor who cheats on his taxes, the mayor having an affair. They will all, someday, receive a visit from Krampus. But most importantly, my name is still there, crossed out with a thin line, but not completely. It's a reminder to me that if I stray from the path, it will be rewritten in dark red again. I don't know what Krampus is, a demon, an enforcer of justice, or something beyond human comprehension. I don't know why he chooses certain people or how he decides who lives and who dies. But one thing is certain. I am grateful to Krampus. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but without him, I would never have confronted what I did. I would have continued to hide from my guilt, pretending to be a better person than I was. Jason would still be suffering for a crime he didn't commit, and I would still be living my quiet life in the library. My life now is vastly different, in many ways worse, but at least, for once, I did the right thing. And every day, I try to do the right thing. I've started volunteering at local charities. I serve meals at a homeless shelter and teach adults to read and write at a literacy class. It's not much, but it's more than doing nothing. Last week, I met a man at the shelter. He was recovering from alcoholism, had lost his family, his job, and almost all hope. I taught him to read and write and helped him with his resume. I'll never forget the smile on his face when he wrote his name for the first time. It was a small thing, but for the first time, I felt like I had changed someone's life for the better. I don't know if Krampus will return for me. Maybe he will. Maybe I'll stray from the path and end up on the naughty list again. But sometimes, at night, I hear sounds on the roof, footsteps, or just the wind moving branches. Sometimes I see red lights outside my window, distant car taillights, or watching eyes. I'm not scared. Instead, I feel reassured, knowing Krampus is still out there, watching over those who do wrong, ensuring justice isn't forgotten. He is a terrifying presence, but also a necessary one, the last bastion when human conscience fails. As I write this, the book is on the table beside me. The leather feels colder than before, and the page is heavier. The list is shorter, but it hasn't disappeared. It never will. Somewhere, someone is reading their name for the first time, feeling the same terror I once felt. And they too will face a choice, to confront the truth or to keep hiding in the shadows. I pray for them, that they have the courage to make the right choice before it's too late, as I did. I don't know if Krampus will return for me. Maybe he will. Maybe I'll stray from the path and end up on the naughty list again. But until then, I'll try to do good. That's all I can do. This book will exist forever, and I too will continue on my path to redemption, as a life saved by telling the truth. Finally, there's something I want to say to Jason Daniels. He'll never read this, but I still need to say it. I ruined him. His youth, his dreams, his trust. It's not something money can repay. It's not something words can heal. But I promise, I will spend the rest of my life making his suffering mean something, to prevent others from making the same mistakes, to prevent other innocent people from being caught in the crossfire. This is my redemption. This is my mission. And if, someday, he forgives me, that would be a miracle. But I won't expect a miracle. I will just keep doing the right thing. The snow has started to fall. Christmas is almost here. Somewhere, Krampus is walking, sack on his back, list in hand, searching for the next name. I look out the window and smile. This year, I have nothing to fear. I've been a good boy.